there YouTube, this is Kristen, and I wanted to talk more about an issue that's really of grave importance to the trans community. I've noticed that folks really aren't talking about it very much, and if they are, there seems to be some misconceptions. One of the misconceptions that I've heard is that Texas already doesn't recognize the transition status of someone. That's actually incorrect. Now, it is correct to say that the Bexar County area in Texas does not recognize the transition status of a trans person. But from El Paso to Houston down to Brownsville, the transition status of folks are currently recognized. In Houston, I can marry a man, but in San Antonio, where my status is not recognized, I can only marry a woman, which is interesting. While there's no set policy in the matter and no law specifically addressing the issue, many people amend their Texas birth certificates to reflect their new post-operative gender. Most of the forward movement the trans community has enjoyed has historically been under-the-table gains. Houston got rid of its cross-dressing ordinance through political sleight of hand. The DMV changed its policy because I, along with a few others, lobbied the head of the DMV legal department, Rebecca Blewett, to create a DMV policy that allowed folks to get their gender changed on their license. The state never took a stance on the issue of the legitimacy of a person's transition status until 2009. The issue here is that in 2009, the Texas state legislature took up the issue of the legal recognition of a transition status. They said that someone can lawfully be issued a marriage license if they show proof of, and I quote, a sex change. The term is not ambivalent. It means one thing and one thing only. It's the first time Texas state law has dealt with the legal status of a trans person. What makes the Wharton case a state issue is that the county clerk of El Paso asked Attorney General Greg Abbott to give an opinion on the state's legal recognition of a person's transition status due to the 2009 law. Abbott decided against giving an opinion and has instead deferred to the Wharton case to work this issue out. So this case is no longer a simple Littleton-like case that's going to affect just one region of Texas. Rather, it's become a case that will decide the state's position in recognizing the transition status of trans folk. Again, the legal question that will be answered in the Nikki Araguz case is Nikki a man or is Nikki a woman? Since the outcome of this case will become the de facto position of the state attorney general, it's a huge deal to TG folks. And the implications are many, from bathroom issues to ID issues to birth certificate issues to marriage law. No matter what the outcome, it will be case law, and that will be used in other states. Should the court use some sort of Orwellian logic to arrive at the conclusion that the state of Texas does not recognize the transition status of trans folk, that will have very real and very tangible repercussions for the TG community. Yes, the case can, and I'm sure will, be appealed, but that process will take years. If it goes to the Supreme Court, it'll likely be 2015 before we can expect that to happen. A lot of damage can be done between now and then. This issue, as well as others, will be addressed at the October town hall meeting. So that kind of addresses some of the misconceptions in this case about the case itself. In my previous videos, I've dealt with the myths surrounding the case. I've debunked one after another the various lies that's come out of Frank Mann's mouth, the ethically challenged lawyer for the other side. Both Phyllis and I and other trans advocates like Monica Roberts have wondered aloud why the national organizations haven't taken on this case, that they haven't really looked at this. They haven't lent their support to it. The problem, I think, with this is twofold. It's part cultural and it's part our problem. That the media has a really long history of yellow journalism where trans issues are concerned. In other words, if I, as a trans woman, point to the moon, a reporter won't report on the moon. They'll report on my manicure and the size of my finger and if it is or is not stereotypically female. The issue in this case is law. And what does the press focus on?
So exactly what's inside the lawsuit? We got our hands on a copy and have poured through it. What we've learned also has the entire town talking. The suit calls into question the marriage between Thomas Araguz and his wife Nikki, saying she was born a he and later had a sex change. Now Araguz's mother and ex-wife don't want Nikki to get a cent from his death benefits, saying he was duped.
Anytime there's an issue of interest that includes genderqueer folks, the press goes right into yellow journalism mode and scares off folks who think we can win rights as long as we ape the very people who oppress us. Ray Hill, the grandfather of the GLBT movement, has this to say.
Now, the motto of the Mattachine Society is what you do, and they put it around their ads. What you do reflects on me, what I do reflects on you, what we do reflects on the rest of the community, so act and be normal. That was their fucking slogan. And at that 1968 conference, the big deal is Franklin Kameny proposed that we adopt the motto, not what the slogan was for the Mattachine Society, but the motto of gay is good. We debated that for 4 hours. I chaired part of that debate. Now, Frank, who was in charge of the minutes, wrote that it passed unanimously. That's a goddamn lie. It did not pass unanimously. There were 6 abstentions out of 18 people. 6 people didn't take a position, and a couple of people voted against it.
About the Stonewall riots, which happened a year after the Mattachine Society's motto was rejected as the de facto motto of the GLBT rights movement, Randy Wicker of the Mattachine Society said, "Screaming queens, forming chorus lines and kicking went against everything that I wanted people to think about homosexual, that we were a bunch of drag queens in the village acting disorderly and tacky and cheap." When the uprising occurred, the Village Voice went right into yellow journalism mode and spun the Stonewall riot stories with descriptions like forces of faggotry, limp breaths, and Sunday fag follies. These descriptions were, in some certain way, true. They were a group of genderqueer people. The lie was in the spin and in the omissions. They failed to cover the real story, which was a demand for equality. That was the story. Instead, the Voice chose to cover the inconsequential, the sensationalistic. Again, this was a rebellion of genderqueer people. They absolutely did set up a high-kick chorus line to mock the macho style of the riot squad's line of attack. The Village Voice spun the story against the GLBT community until a mob of us showed up at their doorstep demanding that they end their yellow journalism tactics. To the Mattachine mind, the Stonewall riot represented their greatest fear. That mindset seems all the more out of touch when we consider that the Stonewall uprising location is now a historic landmark. Ray Hill's friend and colleague Harvey Milk was very aware of the dangers in tethering one's right to equality to vague, arbitrary, and changing notions of normalcy. Milk knew the press had predefined narratives that they used to spin the gay rights debate in the media.
You can have someone that's a transvestite, a man that, for his sexual kicks or orientation, whatever you want to call it, loves to dress up as a woman. If he is a qualified teacher, he can go into any school or he can go into any business and they can't refuse him.
Today, Milk is remembered for turning that narrative on its head and proudly opening his speeches with,
"My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you."
Likewise, do not forget how the press treated the murder of Myra Eichel. They stayed in yellow journalism mode until 200 of us came together in the Houston field where she was murdered and demanded that the press cease their yellow journalistic practices immediately. Do any of you remember the way the media treated Lance Reyna, the trans man honor roll student that was bashed at the Houston Community College during Pride Week? Don't you remember how they filmed him dressed for pride as he said, "I deserve equal rights," without ever mentioning that he was dressed for pride? Do any of you remember the vitriol that report generated? If you forgot, here's one response. This girl is screaming for attention. You just look at his putty hair. She got attention. Now they're whining. Please. Either you conform or you stand out. He obviously wants to stand out. Man up and quit your whining. You're acting like a girl again. Boo-hoo, pity party of one. The Stonewall riot was reaction to the effort to target and take away the rights of genderqueer people, transgender people like butches and femmes and drag queens and transsexuals. Similarly, the call to action in the Nikki Araguz case is a reaction to the current situation whereby TG people are being targeted in an effort to destroy our rights and take away our legal standing. That's what the Nikki Araguz case is about. The press did to Nikki what the press did to us in Stonewall. There are a lot of folks out there who have the warped view of the bullied child who thinks that the bullying will somehow end if she or he can achieve acceptance from the bullies by saying the right things and having the right look. It's that classically backwards mindset that the victim must have done something to deserve their victimization. In the murder case of Myra Eichel, the narrative was she somehow tricked someone. She was deceptive. She deceived her attacker, and therefore, well, those things happen to people like that. Lance? Yeah, he's a honor roll student working his way through college, but, he was asking for it, and he got it. And here, Nikki, what's the media spin? Well, the spin is Nikki is a felon who tricked a handsome and devoted Christian man into marrying her. She's a liar and a trickster, and she's greedy. She doesn't care about the kids because she's trying to steal their inheritance so they won't even be able to go to college. That's what the press did to Nikki, and in my humble opinion, it scared off a lot of those Mattachine Society-minded people. People forget, or maybe they were never educated about how the press works for trans issues. When they see crappy reporting, a lot of folks want to distance themselves, exclaiming, "I'm not like that, we're not like that," without ever realizing that if they were the focus of that story, yes, they would be exactly like that. They could be an honor roll student, have someone walk up behind them, put them in a headlock, put a knife to their throats, bash them in the head, and then throw them to the floor and then kick in their head. And they would still be the bad guy, just like Lance Reyna was the bad guy. He was asking for it. Shouldn't have been in the men's restroom in the first place. The narratives do not change. I don't care who you are. And that's the narrative that the national media ran with. And in my humble opinion, the community believed it and, like lambs to the slaughter, walked away from the issue Nikki's case represents.